Thank you so much for joining us on our third episode of The Word Out West. Today we have ABA therapist Dominique Taylor here to my right.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here, Dominique.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we have to my next right, my co-host John. Thanks for joining me today, John.
Absolutely. Good to be back.
Hope everyone's doing well out there. And because we are addressing the public, we of course will be remiss not to mention the passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter, Gianna Bryant, on yesterday, in addition to other victims that went down in a helicopter crash. We pay our respects because we know what those idols meant to our culture. So may they both rest in peace. And with that being said, I'd love to get into the show. So today, you all, we are talking about ABA therapy. And Dominique's going to tell us what that means. But in addition to that, we're going to connect that to how the lack of ABA therapies in certain communities are causing a trigger for drug abuse. Dominique will tell us more. Can you please tell our audience what it is you do, who you work for, and what ABA therapy is?
Yes, thank you. I can do all of that.
Thank you.
So I'll start by explaining what ABA is. ABA is an acronym that stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. And that just pretty much means ABA therapy is a science, just like psychology, psychiatry, biology, any of those other sciences, but we study specifically behavior, something that you can observe, where other sciences may study what's inside of the mind, or they may study other things. We study only behaviors that you can observe. So that just makes it a lot easier for us to collect data on it and things like that. So what sets ABA apart from other therapies is we focus on how the behavior is affecting its environment, or how the environment is affecting the behavior. So we make it our point to go out to the environments. A lot of other therapies, you have to go into their office and you are telling them about your problems or telling them about things that may be going on. But in ABA therapy, we go out to the actual environment that the behaviors are occurring. So you'll see us a lot in the school districts. You'll see us a lot doing in-home therapy. We will go out in the community because we want a first-hand glance and an analysis on how this environment is affecting this behavior. And that happens all the time. And you wouldn't even realize how the environment affects our behaviors so much.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How does environment impact behavior?
So for an example, we're sitting here in a business-like setting. We're up straight, we have our arms folded, and we are very mannered and things like that.
So she put us on blast.
Yes, we are very prime and in print today because this is the environment that we're in. The cameras are on, people are watching. All of these things are affecting our behavior. If we were having this exact same conversation at a bar, if we were having this conversation at our homes, our behaviors would be different. This is the same with our community, with our children, with our parenting. If we really want to know why a kid is exhibiting certain behaviors, we really need to take a look at the environment or his history of learning reinforcement.
All right.
And so, what, if you could talk a little bit more about kind of that, but what are some of the benefits once we've identified kind of those behavioral or environmental situations or characteristics? What are the benefits of doing an ABA therapy?
So that's a really good question. So first we identified what it is. So the benefits of it is before you can act on it, before you can treat it, before you want to implement anything, we want to know why it's occurring. So when you tap into ABA or applied behavior analysis, we focus on the function or the why. A lot of people are concerned about what the behavior looks like. And we're concerned about why it's occurring. So when you tap into the why, then the response is more functional and it's more effective. So it's beneficial, and there are so many benefits to it because no one wants to waste time or money on a treatment that's not going to be effective. And it's not going to be effective unless you understand why it's occurring. So many times we want to just stop things. We want to decrease this, cut that out, eliminate that. And we're not addressing why it's starting in the first place.
Okay.
Yes. So all of our, and I tell this to parents all of the time, our behaviors are a form of communication, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We behave, even if we're not saying, I'm doing this for attention, I'm doing this because I'm in pain, our behaviors are telling us that.
Absolutely.
So if we eliminate a behavior without replacing it with a more appropriate behavior, it's like we're cutting off someone's voice, or we're cutting off a tool for them to express themselves in an appropriate way. So people are really quick to say, we have to stop this, eliminate this, drug abuse, whatever it is, they want to stop it. We need to first identify why it started, and we need to identify a more appropriate behavior, because when you stop something, you have time left, right? We have time now.
Exactly.
What are we going to do with our time? We want to replace that with something that's more appropriate, things that'll bring more healing to the community, things that'll fill up our time so we don't have that idle time to be introduced to drugs. So we're not surrounded by those people who think that that's just the only thing to do after school now.
And can you spend a little bit more time? Can you talk about, because you've mentioned drug use a couple of times now. Could you open that up and like talk about how ABA specifically is applied to somebody who might be using drugs?
Okay, so I don't know, I'm not familiar with the exact research that is out there, or if there is a specific article where ABA has been applied to someone who is, abusing or using drugs. But in my personal and professional opinion, I have had clients on my caseload who have been using and abusing drugs, and we do implement ABA strategies in order to decrease the likelihood of that behavior to occur. So we do things like, first we understand the function. So there are 4 major functions of the behavior, or why things happen, right? We either do something because we want the attention, right? We want attention from it, or we want access to something. We do it because we want to escape something. Or we can do it because there is some internal stimuli going on. So when you can identify what the function is, then you can see how you can replace that. So if you're using drugs or alcohol, just because it's a social thing, like you like the friends that you hang out with, and you guys have that in common, then that's something that you may want to tap into, that social piece. If you're doing it to escape the stressors of school, the stresses of the street and all those things, then you want to replace that with something that's also going to help you cope with stress. Now if you're doing it to escape some internal stimuli, whether that's internal voices, some anxiety, some depressive like symptoms that are going on inside of the body, inside of the skin, then you may want to consult with someone like a psychiatrist, or someone who is more fluent in those type of behaviors, so you can replace that drug with something that is actually proven to work for the things that you are kind of experiencing. So we don't just want to just go out there and address a problem without doing it the right way, without identifying the function or why it's occurring in the first place.
People use drugs for complicated reasons, and we have
and it's layered. It could be two or three reasons. I do it in the morning because my back hurts. I do it at night because my kids stress me out. You know what I mean? So there are so many layers, especially in the Black community, because we deal with so much and we never have time to process it. There are things that we haven't processed as teenagers, that we're dealing with now as parents, and we're forced to process it now before our kids have to deal with it.
That's right.
So we're kind of playing catch up in this mental health game. So when you apply things like behavior analysis, and it focuses on something that's observable, something you can see and change right away, it kind of makes it more normalized. It kind of makes it more common sense. Of course I would do this to change that. Instead of talking about all of that mentalistic and things that may, kind of turn people off.
Exactly. Now, Dominique, this is a lot to take in. It's brilliant thinking, but I have to say, I'm not sure if a lot of people know about this. Do you know about ABA therapy? If you do, call into the show, 312-738-1060, and talk to us today. We're talking ABA therapy and how it can prevent using drugs too soon. What communities do you feel lack these resources?
That is a really good question. So you mentioned that not a lot of people even know about ABA therapy.
There.
So ABA therapy is, it's more famously known for autism therapy.
Yes.
Or treating individuals with autism. And that's just because a lot of individuals with autism, they may be nonverbal.
I see.
So this means you don't even have to talk or have verbal language in order to change behavior. It is just about the way you manipulate the environment.
Yeah.
So a lot of people associated with autism therapy, but agencies like my agency, Beyond ABA, we want to take it a step further. This is not just for children with autism or children with special needs. This is for children, period. These are best practices for children, teenagers, adults, parents. You can use it on your husbands, your wives, whatever, because this changes behavior. It impacts behavior. And whether you want to see more of something or whether you want to see less of something, ABA therapy will give you the tools to make a greater impact on behavior. So because people don't know about this in the schools or anything outside of autism, they may not know how you can apply ABA therapy into other settings, like into church, at the grocery store, at a classroom, just pretty much any setting that you are seeing behaviors that you want to make change in. You can apply ABA to any of those settings.
Wow.
So a lot of the environments or a lot of the communities that don't have access to this, I would say, are communities where there are a lot of low-income families. And unfortunately, that's because individuals who may be on Medicaid, the state hasn't deemed it important enough to pay for ABA therapy, even though it is proven one of the most effective therapies for individuals with autism.
Wow.
It is proven one of the most effective therapies to help build social skills and those things that you need in order to survive and thrive in life. But those of us who have low incomes and may be on Medicaid, we don't have access, or we are less likely to have access to ABA therapy.
Like people out west.
Like people out west. Like, yes. And those are the populations. And even if you do have access to the insurance, sometimes you may not have an agency that feels comfortable coming to places out west, coming to cities out west, coming to the Austin area, coming to the Garfield Park area, because they have no idea what's going on in there. They only know what they see on the news.
Absolutely.
They're afraid. And then you have children who are not being serviced
Right.
because of a explicit bias.
And parents don't even know what
Right.
they don't know.
And so parents don't know. You have providers who are not going into this environment. You have insurances that are not paying for these services. So Black people or people in these communities, people on the west side, we are getting hit so many ways to make us not succeed in this realm.
In the midst of an opioid crisis.
Yeah.
In the midst of it.
And I would like to, if you could talk a little bit more about that. What do you think that impacts specifically, like that lack of access that we know is true, like for the West and South Side communities? Like, what would you, can you just speak a little bit more about that, and like how that affects maybe like generational problems around substance use, around just general mental health?
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned lack of access. So lack of access becomes normalized, and then you just realize, then you think that there's just nothing out there.
Yeah.
So you learn to cope with what you have. Not to say that that's a bad thing. I think as mothers, Black mothers, single mothers, fathers, that's just how we thrive. That's how we survive. We just learn to cope.
Yeah.
But when we are not allowed the same access to mental health services as other people, then it is inequality. It is inequitable. It is not fair. It's keeping us very stagnant in our health. It's keeping us stagnant in our mental health, and that's how you perpetuate generational curses of not addressing your mental health. Because it's not normalized.
It's not.
So now even us having this conversation is like,
people are talking about this. Are they going there?
And so we really have to continue to normalize it, so that we can then become try to find ways to just get more resources.
Sure.
We have to be that squeaky wheel. And
do.
if we don't know that we're broken in that area, we're not going to squeak.
Well said.
So
Yeah.
we have to know that we deserve this. That this is not, you don't have to wait until, everything is falling apart for you to reach out and get some type of therapy. You know what I mean? Like I think it was taught and kind of embedded in us, like, you better pray about it first, and then you better go to your big mama, and then you gotta, go to your elders, and nobody in that list has taught us to go to therapy, has taught us to just think outside of the box and find ways to heal from these generational curses of trauma, generational curses of, drug exposure. It was very common growing up to be exposed to drugs at a very early age.
Very normal if you're from out west.
Absolutely.
Cigarettes, marijuana.
Absolutely.
Heroin.
Drinking. I mean, it was it was normalized, and that is more normalized than addressing your mental health through therapy.
Thank you for that question,
through ABA therapy.
John, because
Absolutely,
I think generational is a big buzzword on this show. We're going to be using it a lot because of the opioid crisis on the west side. The main purpose of this show is to cut the idea of this happening to another generation.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
ABA
important.
therapy and therapy period and being cognizant of mental health is one way to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I am very happy to be sitting here talking among other millennials about mental health. It is a generational curse that we are breaking.
We're breaking it. No, I'm so
If you don't
serious.
see us, check us out because it's everywhere. We talk about self-care differently.
Yes, we
talk
do.
about breaking curses
Yes, we
differently.
do.
We talk about actually going to therapy and seeking mental help differently.
And we talk about it as if it's not a sign of weakness anymore.
right.
This is our strength. This is how we get our strength. We are
That's right.
changing the narrative. So
And that's all
get
right.
on this movement.
And
It's
this is
good.
not like, if our mothers were smarter or if they knew what they... It's when we know better,
We do better.
Yeah.
And we are doing better because we are acknowledging the mental health and the links to drug abuse. And the only way to get in front of this is to think about the preventive measures before this even reaches our generations. So it's very important that we continue to have this conversation. Very important. Go ahead, John, you had a question.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up. So,
Please.
but to help normalize these conversations, what do you think talking about it I think is great, but what do you think from like a structural perspective do you think that we need to do in order to increase access to these very much needed services, like therapy, like substance use treatment, ABA therapy, whatever? Yeah.
That's a really good question. I think a lot of us, we have platforms now, and using those platforms to just bring light to a different form of healing, and this way of thinking. We can also share our personal stories. A lot of times, we'll go rah for someone else, but then when the spotlight is on us, we
Don't wanna tell our story.
Yeah.
we don't, because
Claim
no
up.
one wants to be vulnerable. No one wants to be seen as weak. So we need to find our strength into telling our testimonies and, so people can know neurological differences. We all have
Sure.
them. No one is the same as anyone else. So things that my company has done, we specifically go to like Black radio stations, and we talk about it because we know that it's that older generation that still listens to the radio. We need to change their mindsets first. Those are the ones who are raising their grandkids, as
That's right.
sometimes. So we have to do that. We also go to churches, and we train the daycare staff at the church. We talk to the parents at the church, and we just let them know. No, we're not saying we're nowhere near saying you're doing a bad job as a mother.
Right.
But we're just saying if you're having troubles with this behavior, why don't you try it this way?
Right.
And see if it helps enrich their environment and help de-stress yours.
Are you finding
Yeah.
people to be open to that?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. So I started a vlog, and through the vlog, I started sharing my personal story.
Wow.
I did. I have a son with autism.
Wow.
I do. And I have been in the field for almost 10 years, but and my son is 10, and I've been helping people, resources, but I never shared my story. So when I started sharing my story, then people started like DMing me, messaging me personally because they're like, wow, like
that personal connection.
oh yeah, like you can preach all day, but when you can actually say, this is, I've been there, I've been in your shoes, I know exactly what you're going through as a young mother, as a single mother, as a whatever you may feel, an insecure mother, a whatever, a guiltful mother.
Yeah.
You know, we all go through it. So the more you normalize it, then people are a little more receptive in their time. Sometimes it just takes time.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I can believe that.
This is generational that we're talking about. So it's not going to be fixed overnight.
I believe that.
Yeah. But whatever your progress is, just stay the course of your progress. Whether it takes you 3 years to start therapy.
Wow.
But if it's on your mind now, just jot it down. Just there is a process, and we can't force anyone.
Right.
Even in behavior analysis, we call it shaping a behavior.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Shaping.
Yeah. So we applaud and we praise steps towards that final behavior.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great work. So then we're hoping that parents are watching who live out west and they're raising children, grandparents who are raising children and grandchildren. And if you are, you have 5 minutes to call in at 312-738-1060. But this is generational. This entire show is generational. And we want to penetrate the audience who this impacts the most. And that's millennials who are raising children in this opioid crisis. So please understand that sitting next to an ABA therapist is one answer to this solution. But like Dominique mentioned, this is not going to cure overnight. We all have a responsibility to put our work in when it comes to curing our young people and giving them the tools to avoid drugs at an early age. Drugs at an early age is a trigger to a national crisis. And what Chicago wants to do is get ahead of this problem. So that is the purpose of our show, Word Out West. What you can do is check us out every Monday night at 5. We'd love it if you checked us out. And checking us out, 5 p.m., The Word Out West, Monday nights at 5. Call into the show. Tweet us on your cable channels. You can check us out online at cantv.org. Let's get ahead of this crisis. Let's make sure that our young people do not die by opioid abuse. Let's make sure that we educate them about ABA therapy. Tell us in our last minutes, how can we find you and more about Beyond ABA LLC?
You can find me, you can go to our website, that's www.com. So that's com.
Looks like we have a caller, Dominique. Oh my goodness.
Even better.
Even
Or you could just
better.
call right now
Yeah,
and
call
talk.
right now.
Let's talk. Forget all that.
And I am going to go.
Sometimes I question authority. And a lot of times when it comes towards children, especially in school in terms of behavior, it's always they put them on some type of medication.
Oh, I think we might have lost him.
I heard a little bit of it. He was talking about children with behavior disabilities and how
They
most people
place
are instantly putting them on medication. Caller, are you still there? We may have lost you, but we'll address that. Dominique, please. Let's address medicating.
That is usually the very first question that I get from parents, because a lot of schools or people surrounding the schools, they use that as an easy, quick fix to just get through their day without distractions. And not negating for the children who actually need medication. So there are children who need medication, whether it's for whatever they need it for, in order to be healthy, to be their healthiest selves. So there is a huge stigma out there when it comes to medication, and I don't want to put any one side is better than the other. I will say, caller, you have to do your research. Do not just get the school diagnosis. If your school has diagnosed your kid with autism or ADHD or something that requires them to take medicine, you say, thank you for this information, and I'm going to go get a second opinion. And then you get on every waiting list that you can, because usually when it comes to children, there is going to be a waiting list. You get on every waiting list that you can, and then you just get a second opinion. And then you can either fight that or you can go with the flow. But a diagnosis is is just that. Medication only can do so much. And sometimes it doesn't do anything. Sometimes it has adverse effects. Something like ABA therapy, we want to make sure the risk to benefit ratio is definitely outweighed.
Okay.
So there are not a lot of risk. We won't put you in any riskful situations. We don't place any restrictions on you. Medications like for ADHD, it is a restrictive medication because it actually restricts some of your movements.
Right.
So when you do something less restrictive like ABA therapy, you teach the child how to self-regulate. So you're not using a restrictive chemical
Yeah.
that you are giving them. Now, I'm not taking any validity away from medication
Sure.
for those who need it.
Right.
But if a parent is skeptical, if it's needed and if it's wanted, I would get a second opinion and a third opinion.
I love that.
Yeah.
Second and a third opinion. Thank you so much, caller, for calling in the last minute. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Becky, for
Thank you.
being here.
Great
This was
information.
awesome
Thank
Thank you.
information.
And if you want any more free tips, I do have a parenting vlog. It's called Dom, the BCBA Mom. So DOM, the BCBA Mom. And I have a lot of ABA tips for parents,
That's
for
great.
moms, for students, for kids, with kids with special needs and kids who are just special to us.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
I
you
love
can
it.
check that out for more information
great.
or online.
Well, thank you so much. Tuning in to our third episode, Dominique, for being here, and to my co-host,
Yay.
John.
Absolutely.
Check
This
us
was
out
so
next
much fun.
Monday at 5. I knew we'd enjoy you.
This was
Mondays
so
at
much fun.
5. We have a new special guest, and just stay tuned on our social media. You can follow us on Facebook at Westside Task Force. Send us an email if you're interested in training how to administer Narcan to avoid fatalities from overdose. Again, word out west. We appreciate you so much. Tune in next Monday at 5.